Hello everyone and welcome on De Papier de Rêve channel. I'm Ursula and today I will be painting with you some roses. As you can see on the title of the video, this painting is quite difficult. Even for me it's quite a difficult subject, and I wanted to add quite a lot of details and tiny things that make it a little bit difficult. But please don't be afraid by this difficulty. There is always something that you can take off this a little bit more difficult painting. You can try to paint some part of this painting or to simplify it. It's all okay and there is no problem with that. And I will post another video with the same subject but in an easier way next week. So stay tuned for that. So I'm starting this painting by painting the background first, and for that I've just wet the paper in some random places. I do not think too much about it. It's just helped to me to have softness in some area, and then I'm adding some greens like I'm doing right now. So for the green, I'm using a mix of Indanthrene blue, nickel azure yellow, and some pyrrol orange transparent. This combination of three colors helps me to have the really perfect green for these roses. And I kept changing the green and my mix of green every time I'm going back to my palette, so that there is a lot of different tones in this green. There is some cooler green and some warmer green, and the only thing to just pay attention to is to add really a tiny bit of transparent pale orange. It's just in order to tone down the green a little bit, but not too much. As you know, green and red oranges are complementary colors, so if you mix them you will obtain a neutral tone, like a grey. But right now I just want to tone down a little bit the green, but not I do not want a total grey color. As you can see, I have put green all over my sheet of paper, except in the central part, because it's the area that I want my flower to be in. And I kept this area quite white, because my flowers are a little bit lighter than the background. So I try to keep the green away from this area. But I pay attention also to have some soft edges in this area, and also some hard edges, in order to have some contrast and interest in the area, even though there is no detail right now, but that will come a little bit later. While my background is still wet, I want to add some darker color in the background. It will blend in the wet background, and there is no problem to that. It will add some texture and some other tone of green in the area. So my background is coming together quite nicely, but as my paper is wet, the green is going a little bit everywhere. So I use a sponge to take a little bit out the green in some area. It helps me to carve some area, lighter area in the background. I can add a little bit of water in some places to reactivate all the pigment, and then I'm taking them back with my sponge, and it just helps me to get some white back into the paper. It seems a little bit of a waste to put some pigment in the paper and then taking it back with the sponge, but it helps really to shape the shape of my flower. I can carve them, I can just adjust all the shape like that, and it's quite a useful tool to have in your bag when you want to paint. The sponge is really a useful tool. And I'm adding a little bit more color into the background. I really take my time with the background because I want it to be quite soft, so it's a perfect time to work it and add some splashes of colors, just the same green as the beginning, Indanthrene blue, nickel azo yellow, and a tiny bit of transparent pyrrol orange. And now it's time to work a little bit the flower. I'm starting by adding some tones of pink in the lighter flower. And for that I'm using Rose Madder Lake and Nickel Azo Yellow just to have the perfect peach tone. And I'm adding this color, and then I will soften it a little bit. As you can see, the area is wet, so the pink is bleeding a little bit, but I want it a little bit more soft, so I will blend it a little bit. If you want to have a look at my reference image, you can head up to my blog. I always post my reference image when I am using one, so that you can also try the same subject and try this painting with me. These roses are quite peculiar because when they are in a bud shape, they are really yellow, orangey yellow, and then when they flourish, they become almost white, but with a speckle of pink. So it's quite strange, but I really like that, and then it's really nice to paint because there is a lot of colors. It's not just white roses. So as you can see, I'm starting to add some Nickel Azo Yellow in the yellow area of the flowers. And I'm going quite slow, I have to say, but it's because I know that this subject is quite difficult for me. So I prefer to work a little bit slower and have time to just adjust the shapes and the colors, and I just want to have time. I'm starting to be pretty happy with what is happening on the paper. I think that the colors that I'm using for the flower are really perfect for this subject, but there is a little problem that you can see on my paper. I starting to have some watermarks in some area because my paper is starting to dry in some area, and I'm adding a little bit more water in this area, so there is an imbalance of water in this area. That's why there is some watermark. But that's not really a problem. I can fix that, and I will do that in a little bit. I just want to add some color back in the edges of the watermark and just blend it in the background and almost re-wet all the background in order to just smooth the water level in everywhere, so that there is not any marks in my first layer. As you can see, I've managed to erase all the watermark on my paper, and things are really going quite well. And I'm letting this layer dry totally before adding some other details. And while it's drying, I'm just letting you enjoy this shot of roses. That's not the roses I'm painting, but I think they are really quite cute. These roses are coming from a garden in Barcelona. There were an exposition of roses last week, and I just took the opportunity to go see the roses and take some picture and take some video, so that I have a lot of subject to paint. And I even took the time also to make some sketches in the garden. There were quite a lot of painters here with me, so it was quite funny to see all those painters. But let's go back to the painting. I'm starting to add some details in the flower, and for that I'm still using the same mix of color. I'm using Nickel Azure Yellow with a touch of Rose Madder Lake, and I'm painting some buds of roses for now. I know that it's quite abstract right now, but bear with me, it will become a little bit clearer in a moment. As I want, like always, some hard edges and soft edges, I'm first applying the color, and then I soften some parts out so that there is a little bit more softness to it. And also, while the buds are not totally dry, I just painted them so they are quite wet. I want to add some greens to just ground them into the stem and make the two color blind between the oranges and the green of the stem. It's quite a dangerous operation because orange and green are almost complementary, so I can get some really muddy color. But if I'm just being mindful of the quantity of water in my brush, I can do that really easily, and the green will not bleed too much into the colors. And I will also soften up this part too, so that there is a lot of fluidity, and it's like the buds are a little bit floating on the paper, and I really like that. I really like this kind of softness in flower painting. And I try to have some energetic brush mark wherein I'm soften some parts so that it's soft, but it had also a little bit of energy into it, and it become a little bit more interesting that way. Now that my flowers are a little bit more in shape, they are a little bit more clearer on my paper, I want to add some details around the flower. I want to work a little bit more the shapes of the petal around the flower. So I'm just using the negative painting technique. I'm painting around my shape in order to make the flower appear on my paper. So for that, I'm using the same mix as in my first layer, Indanthrene blue, nickel azure yellow, and a tiny bit of transparent pyrrol orange. I quite load my brush with this mix, and I'm just tracing around the shape, some a little bit of a bold color here, and then I soften it into the background, but I keep the edge around the flower very neat, so that it adds a little bit more definition in this area. I'm not using this technique everywhere around the grape of flower. I'm just using it in some area in order to make those areas pop a little bit more on my paper, but I still have some soft edges and hard edges around my flower. It helps really a lot with the fluidity and the softness and the poetry of this painting. So there is a lot more details into the background. My flower is a little bit more defined right now. You can see some buds of flower appearing around the flower, but I want to work a little bit the background even more and add some idea of foliage. It will be very blurry because it's how I like it, but I still really add some more color in order to darken the background a little bit more, so that my white, almost white flower will pop a little bit more on my paper. I want to just build the contrast in order to make this painting a little bit more energetic and interesting. I'm still using the same mix of color, Indanthrene blue, nickel azo yellow, and a tiny bit of transparent pyrrol orange. I really like to have the same green along all my painting, but I will change a little bit the mix along the way. Some more blue, some more yellow, so that there is a lot of different tones of green on my paper, but I'm still using the same color for that. I think it's very important for a painting to be quite coherent at the end. So as you can see, I'm adding some splashes of color with my brush. I'm being quite bold. I'm not thinking too much about shapes. And then I will just rinse my brush and soften some area, and it will create some interesting shapes and an idea of foliage without adding too much details. When I'm around some just important details, I just want to blend the color with the details so that there is not a strong line around this bud, for example. I just want it to be really integrated into the background. And for all the marks I'm doing right now, I try to integrate them in the background so that you have the impression that it was made just in one go, but it's actually 2 layers, one upon another. But I want really to be integrated really well with my first background. Because I think it will be a little bit more natural that way, and a little bit more just soft. And now I'm going back to the flower. For now, then they do not have a lot of details, but I want to add some shadows into the petals so that you can understand them a little bit better. And for that, I'm using lavender with the mix of oranges I have from the beginning. But the more I'm painting the shadows, the more I'm adding lavender, but not other colors, so that it will become bluer and bluer and bluer. I know that I'm talking quite a lot about this lavender from Daniel Smith, but I really think it's a really beautiful color, and especially for making shadows. It's the perfect cold bluish color so that you can really make shadows really well. It works really well with yellowish color because when you mix them together, they make a really beautiful light gray. And it's a color that is just a tiny bit opaque so that it will just pop even on a dark background. And for applying those shadows, I'm using the same technique like I'm always using. I'm just adding some colors first, and then I will blend some area in order to soften some edges, and I will get some hard edges and soft edges as always. And this part of the painting is the part where I pay the most attention to my reference picture in order to place the shadow in quite a realistic way. Even though I'm always working a little bit abstract, there is no real realism in my painting. I just want the shadows to be placed in a logic way, so I'm still using a lot my reference picture for that. I'm also adding some details to the flower in the middle. It will be the star of the show, so I want to just add some details to it in order for you to understand a little bit that there is a really white flower here and with a beautiful yellow heart. And I'm adding the last details into this painting. Right now I'm adding some more details into the flower buds surrounding the flower. I'm still using the same mix of rose madder lake and nickel azure yellow, and I use just a darker color, a darker mix, so that I can add some another tone of orange into the flower, and it will add some more definition and some more volume to it. Even though if it is a very difficult subject for me, I think I'm doing quite well with this painting of roses. I add a lot more details that I'm used to in my rose painting in general. But I think it's going really quite well, and that's just because I've progressed step by step. I have taken my time a lot. I often take a step back, watch what's happening on my paper, and then react if I need to react. And I think it's also important for you, when you are painting a difficult subject, just to take your time and progress step by step, and you will achieve what you want. I'm sure that there is a tiny part of this painting that you can paint without any problem, and it's the composition of all those elements that make it difficult for me. But if you want to try, there is no problem. You can try the full painting if you want, but you can also just focus your work on some part of this painting, and step by step you will progress in your painting. And as I've said at the beginning, there will be another painting, not with the same subject, but with roses also, but in an easier way next week. So if you want to have a go with an easier subject, just wait for next week for the next video, and you will be able to try you too some roses painting. For the last touches on this painting, I want to add some darker color in order to still building the contrast between the flowers that are quite light and the background that is a little bit darker. And I'm making some details right now with my brush surrounding the flower at the center that will make it pop really a lot more, and these tiny details are really important for the impact of this painting at the end, and I was a little bit afraid to do them because adding some darker color in a white area is always a little bit worrying, but I think I take really a good decision here, and it looks really good that way. And at the end, I wanted to add some more foliage under the flower, so that I'm using this dagger-shaped brush to make some marks on my paper with a really strong green, a really dark green, and I just want to paint some leaves, even if they are quite abstract. I think that they add a little bit of context to this painting, and it was just the perfect addition for the end. And this video is now ending. Thanks for watching, and I hope you like it. Please check the blog post for more information about it, and of course stay tuned for next week's video, which will be a little bit easier than this one. And of course tell me what you think in the comments. See you soon.